back with your first read on politics this morning. Surprising new polls from Iowa show Bernie Sanders now within striking distance of Hillary Clinton, and why everyone may want to pay more attention to Ben Carson. Plus, Scott Walker says constructing a wall on the U.S. Canadian border is, quote, a legitimate idea. Well, is this another unforced error, or will it lend a hard line on immigration help turn his campaign around? Joining me live now is NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. As always on a Monday, lots to get to. But let's start, Mark, with these poll numbers coming out of Iowa, with Bernie Sanders surging 14 points since May and now trails Hillary Clinton by just 7 points in that state. Of course, great news for the Sanders campaign. But if you say that, we have to use, look at history here, specifically the last 3 presidential cycles. And if you're going to use that as a guide, you know what happened after that. Things could look very, very different in a few months' time.
That's right, Francis, and it's worth noting that Bernie Sanders, in addition to Donald Trump and Ben Carson, have had fantastic summers, if not the entire month of August. But when you look back into the past August of the last 3 presidential cycles, you see the winners were Howard Dean in the August of 2003, that Hillary Clinton was way ahead of Barack Obama in August of 2007, and John McCain was essentially deader than a doornail in that Republican contest. And then in August of 2011, the big movers and shakers were Michelle Bachmann, who won the Iowa straw poll, as well as Rick Perry, who was surging in the polls, and none of those people ended up winning the presidential nomination. So I think that perspective is important when we're looking at today's poll numbers. All
right, and you're looking at this point, too. Let's talk about the Republican that many thought would be doing so much better when it comes to this time, Scott Walker. In some ways, Walker made for the type of retail politics needed to succeed in Iowa, but now when you look at it as a distant third, and then you consider comments that were made over the weekend on Meet the Press. Let's listen to that.
We don't talk about a northern border where if this is about securing the border from potentially terrorists coming over. Well, we want to build a wall north of the border.
Some people have asked us about that in New Hampshire. They raised some very legitimate concerns, including some law enforcement folks that brought that up to me at one of our town hall meetings about a week and a half ago. So that is a legitimate issue for us to look at.
Okay, so you have the Washington Post who writes that some Walker supporters are worried about the so-called unforced errors. So how much of that, are you going to consider the Trump factor there, or is there something else at work with that?
I think that there is a Trump factor, that we probably wouldn't be talking about a wall between the U.S. border with Canada if it weren't for Donald Trump and all of his comments on immigration. He's pushed most of the field to the right on immigration. But, Francis, there is also worth noting that on issues even outside of immigration, where it seemed that Scott Walker has had some big problems in the perception front. And again, it is August. There's plenty of stumbles for every type of candidate to be able to hold. But when you are trying to win over endorsements to get money, you want to be seen as somebody who is credible, and you don't want so many doubts about your positions, whether it's on birthright citizenship and the 14th Amendment, what you're going to do with immigration, having a wall on the U.S. Canadian border. And so the question is, what are a lot of the elites from the Republicans thinking about Scott Walker's comments?
It's interesting when you talk about the stumbles, because we've seen a lot of these candidates stumble when it comes to immigration. Most recently, you can throw Governor Christie in with that, especially with his comments over the weekend suggesting that the government track immigrants just like the United States tracks FedEx packages, or FedEx tracks their packages as well. He actually defended the idea. Let's listen.
This is once again a situation where the private sector laps us in the government with the use of technology. Let's use the same type of technology to make sure that 40% of the 11 million people here illegally don't overstay their visas. If FedEx can do it, why can't we use the same technology?
All right, so we know immigration is the hot topic right now when it comes to the GOP, but no candidate seems to be getting a bump when it comes to that discussion. So how long can a Christie hang on?
Well, I'd say that Donald Trump has gotten a pretty big bump using the issue of immigration. But again, Francis, this is just worth noting just how Donald Trump has moved the party. We wouldn't, the fact that we're talking about FedEx tracking of undocumented immigrants, where in 2012, Mitt Romney's self-deportation remark was the big thing. That remark seems very tame by comparison to what we've heard over the last few months.
Well, a lot to watch and see, and what else will be said out there. So as always, Mark Murray, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you.